What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing some really entertaining battles submitted to the channel by IG MaxiPad, who's running a fun triple buff team of Whimsicott, Shadow Camerupt, and Shadow Gigalith. Now these battles were sent in quite a while ago, but it was around the same sort of time that I received another Shadow Gigalith submission, so I didn't want to showcase both of the teams so close to each other. But anyways, with that being said, let's just get straight into the question of the day. What's your personal favourite non-meta defining move update of the season? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. I should go into the first battle, leading Whimsicott into Galarian Weezing. Of course, this is a horrible matchup for us, so we're going to be safe swapping into Shadow Camerupt, not a Pokemon that I would typically associate with a safe swap. However, in this scenario, it's actually looking pretty good for us because they come in with a Lantern on Spark, where, of course, Spark is double resisted, but also they throw on horrific timing, giving us a full Incinerate in for free, which means we can farm to nearly back-to-back Earth Powers once again, and Earth Power number 2 is going to guarantee the final shield. But again, they throw on terrible timing, which means likely we can farm up to 100 energy before throwing. The opponent is going to make quite a nice catch there, catching an Earth Power where it's resisted onto Meganium. However, we can just stay in, fire off 2 more Incinerates, and then swap out into Whimsicott, where of course we're going to resist everything they can throw. The opponent fires off the Frenzy Plant, they're not going to reach another charge move. The opponent comes back in with the Galarian Weezing, but we've got Hurricane for coverage. Hurricane going to deal big damage, and it's also a CMP tie. So that's pretty much best case scenario for us. We're going to come in with our Shadow Gigalith. The opponent going to pack some energy there. We then swap into our Camerupt. We probably weren't trying to catch a charge move, but it doesn't really matter because Shadow Gigalith insanely fast to reach charge moves this season with Lock On. First one, Rock Slide gets the KO up against the Lantern, and we can fire off a second Rock Slide, and of course from this range it takes out Galarian Weezing, and we're able to take that game. So heading into the next battle, we're going to see Whimsicott into Shadow Dragonair. So this is a great lead matchup for us. The opponent going to be safe swapping into Tinkaton, and we can come in with our Shadow Camerupt. Now, of course, Bulldoze is super effective, but it's not a very good move. So despite the fact that Shadow Camerupt is a very glassy Pokemon, we're able to tank that pretty comfortably, and even with a debuff, there's just no way they can farm us down. However, of course, they let the move go through. They come in, they Dragon Breath farm us down with the Shadow Dragonair, and at this point, they are going to fire off a Wrap. Wrap is going to debuff us. They swap into a Galarian Corsola, and now of course we come in with our Gigalith, where unfortunately Lock-On is double resisted. However, I mean, of course it only does 1 damage anyway, so I guess it's still doing 1 damage regardless of whether they're a ghost type or not, so that was kind of irrelevant for me to say. But anyways, we are going to spamming out these rock sides here. Next one is going to be double shielded by the Corsola, but we're just super spammy. We reach yet another rock side here. Rock side number 3 gets them fairly low. The opponent predicts the swap back into Whimsicott. However, that's fine with us because we don't throw the energy just yet. We're going to shield the Alcatel. It is a CMP tie, but we go for a Seed Bomb, and we actually go for a slight undercharge, and that undercharge is going to allow us to come out with the Hurricane. Actually, we could have fully charged the Seed Bomb there. It doesn't really make a difference, but either way, Hurricane guarantees the knockout up against the Corsola, and we're able to take that game. Into the next battle, we're going to see Dedenne in the lead, so pretty good matchup for us, but we've also got Shadow Camerupt, which is a really dominant matchup there. They're going to swap out into a Bullet Seed Credilli, which is also pretty fine. They actually shield the first move. I mean, it makes sense because they're going to be on Rock Tomb. However, Credilli can tank moves from Whimsicott fairly comfortably, but either way, we're going to tank the move there. We're then going to swap out into our Shadow Gigalith, and we're going to shield the first move as the opponent doesn't actually bait with a Rock Tomb. For once, a Credilli user going for the Grass Knot where it's super effective, which means we've not debuffed ourselves just yet. However, of course, after throwing a superpower, our attack and our defense are debuffed, and unfortunately that doesn't quite get the KO anymore. But that's fine with us. We're just going to no-shield this. Grass Knot is going to get the knockout. We can come in with the Shadow Camerupt and get the Incinerate farm down. Now, of course, if they come back in with Dedenne, they have zero play here whatsoever, as we resist everything they can possibly throw. The opponent goes for a Parabolic Charge that is double resisted there up against the ground typing. Potentially the opponent just maybe not aware that Shadow Camerupt is a ground type Pokemon, but they're going to have Typhlosion in the pack, so I guess they were just completely walled all around there, and so we're able to take that game. But into the next battle, we're going to see a Shadow Celio in the lead. Bit of a tricky matchup for us, because if we swap out into Shadow Camerupt, they can outpace us to a Surf before we can get to any charge move of our own. So at this point, we're actually going to stay in, grab a shield advantage, and then look to safe swap into our Shadow Gigalith. We can still outpace them here quite comfortably to a Rock Slide, and Rock Slide from the Shadow is going to threaten the final shield. And if they are double shielding their Shadow Celio, maybe they don't have the best answer to a Shadow Gigalith, so we are going to see the opponent is going to swap out eventually, and they swap out into a Licky Licky. However, we can actually still outpace them. Gigalith just insanely spammy. I'm honestly really disappointed that I don't still have a Shadow one of these saved up. I, for some reason, built a Purified Boldor, which is the middle stage evolution of this Pokemon, and that was like the only Shadow that I caught back when Rock and Roller was in Shadow Grunts. But yeah, really strange decision on my end, and obviously a bit annoying. But either way, we are going to see a Kanto Ninetales coming in. We go for a Rock Tomb there, which is quite interesting, just because Earth Power is stab. Earth Power would have actually got the knockout there, but it doesn't really matter. At this point, we're kind of just playing with our food. We swap out, we make a catch onto our Shadow Gigalith. The opponent goes for the undercharge, as we can just lock on farming down, and we're able to take that game. Into the next battle, we're going to see Seismitoad in the lead. So a great matchup for us. Of course, they can go for an Icy Wind here, and it looks like they actually win CMP, which is not ideal because, of course, they're going to debuff our attack stat. However, they likely shield up the Seed Bomb anyway, so it's not the worst thing ever, as we can grab a shield advantage, and we can actually outpace them to the next move. However, we're going to look to overfarm as the opponent comes in with Oranguru. Now, this is a bit awkward for us because Whimsicott does actually resist the typical charge moves, but we're just so low that they could have just gone for a Confusion Farm Down, which is why, of course, we're forced to swap out into our Camerupt. But anyways, we're going to go for the Rock Tomb here, debuffing their attack stat, but they did go for a Trailblaze first, which means Brutal Swing is still enough damage to get the knockout. However, we basically just sacrifice the Camerupt, realizing it doesn't have an awful lot of play into Seismitoad. We fire off the Rock Slide gonna get the knockout, and they come back in with that Seismitoad. Now, we're going to shield here. The opponent is just going to bait with an Icy Wind, so maybe could have no-shielded, but they're actually on double Confusion, which is quite an interesting lineup here. We can go for the Hurricane. Hurricane is going to connect. It does big damage, but they're able to fully fast move farm us down, and they come out with a charge move loaded. The opponent goes for an Ice Punch. That doesn't do enough damage there. We can now go for a Rock Slide. We do overfarm as much as possible without taking the Confusion damage. They come back in with a Seismitoad, and again, we throw as late as possible here. Superpower, does it KO? No, just barely not able to do so, and unfortunately, we lose that game. Into the next battle, the opponent just conceded immediately, I guess. I'm not really sure what happened there, but anyways, I guess we're just going to search for a new opponent. We'll take the free win, of course. Into the next battle, we're going to see a Jumpluff in the lead. So not a great matchup for us, and a little bit awkward just because Gigalith, whilst yes, we are a Rock-type Pokemon, of course, we're going to take super effective damage from the Energy Balls, but we've got Hurricane. Hurricane is going to connect, and it does big damage. We're likely going to shield here. We are going to shield at the last second, and the opponent does full send the Acrobatics. We swap out into Shadow Camerupt, and we're just going to no shield here. Honestly, Acrobatics would very nearly one-shot us. The opponent actually goes for the Energy Ball there, which still does huge damage, but now they swap out into Malamar. And honestly, this is kind of fine for us because we can debuff their attack stat. Whimsicott is still very healthy, and unless they're on Hyper Beam, which, I mean, they could be on, but we should be able to tank anything they throw here very comfortably, especially if they don't have Hyper Beam, which they don't. And now their final Pokemon is going to be a Wigglytuff. Now, we don't throw on the best timing here. We do give away a full Charm in for free, which is not ideal for us, but we can now just go for back-to-back Seed Bombs here. Second one is probably going to be no-shielded, and it is, but we can now come in with our Shadow Gigalith, and of course, this is their final Pokemon. They can go for an Icy Wind. This is going to debuff our attack stat. However, we are just super spammy here. Again, we don't throw on the best timing. I'm not really sure what's going on with our timing up against the Charm user, but either way, it looks like it won't matter in this battle. We're debuffed, but Superpower still gets the knockout, and we're able to take that game. Into the next battle, we're going to see Carbink in the lead. So this is going to be a decent matchup for us. However, 2 Seed Bombs likely won't get the knockout. Surprisingly, we are staying in this matchup, which I'm not so sure about. We go for the Hurricane. That does big damage. And then we're actually able to swap out and likely catch a Drill Peck, which is resisted damage. So I guess that was a good play in the end. Except no, we don't get the lock-on farm down. And that is really unfortunate for us. We're going to have to shield a Drill Run here, which certainly is not ideal. Especially since they come in with a Medicham, which is going to completely resist resist everything we can throw. Of course, we are super spammy here, and of course, they don't have much fast move pressure whatsoever, so I don't think they can go for a full fast move farm down, and they did actually shield the first move there. I guess we could be running like Solar Beam, for example, but either way, we're going to go for a last second superpower, and that is going to deal decent damage, but they've got so much energy. So of course, we can tank an Ice Punch on the Whimsicott, but it's going to get us very low. So the opponent gonna swap out, try to snipe with the Carbink, but we can come in with the Shadow Camera up, and we're going to go for an Earth Power on CMP. Of course, Earth Power, if it connects, it's going to deal big damage, and actually, that might just put them into perfect Incinerate farm down range. Of course, unfortunately, we're still taking quite a lot of damage here from the rock throws, but we come out with a charge move loaded. Medicham, realizing they're going to lose CMP, they opt not to throw straight away, which makes a lot of sense. We then swap out into Whimsicott, but unfortunately, that doesn't work out for us as they've got the Ice Punch loaded, and now they can outpace us to another charge move, and so unfortunately, I think we just concede the match there. But into next battle, dream lead matchup for us as we see a Como-O in the lead. Amazing matchup for us, of course. The opponent now going to swap out into a Dust Noir. We don't have a solid response, so we're just going to chip with a Seed Bomb. I don't mind that play, because now we can come in with the Shadow Camera up. But unfortunately, we're probably going to have to double shield here if we want to maintain alignment, which isn't really ideal for us. We're actually going to no-shield this. Can we tank it? No, it's a Dynamic Punch. That easily gets the one-shot, but we can come in and go for a full farm down. Unfortunately, they're now going to come in with a Typhlosion. Not ideal for us in the slightest, but they no-shield the Hurricane, and the opponent is going to bank a Thunder Punch, but we've still got play here. Now, the opponent, they've got 2 shields. They have to start using them surely, so they shield up the rock side there. Okay, I'm not really sure if the opponent was lagging or if it's just visual delay there. Honestly, I don't have a clue, but we throw on CMP here, and honestly, we can shield this. We can very nearly swap out back into our Whimsicott, so we're going to swap out. We're able to catch a charge move. Honestly, might have been slightly better to maybe deal a little bit of fast move pressure, but the opponent then swaps out, and they just go down to a single lock-on. This battle is insane right now. We go for the rock side first because we didn't want to debuff ourselves, and now we reach the superpower. Superpower takes out the Como-O, and we're able to take that game. So into the next battle, another great lead for the Whimsicott, as we're going to see a Greninja. The opponent going to be swapping out into Talonflame, and we can come in with our Shadow Gigalith. This is such a good matchup for us. Rockside gets the one-shot. They come back in with Greninja, and if they overfarm here, we can reach a Superpower. Superpower should be grabbing a shield. Nope, never mind. They no shield, and I think Gigalith is just putting in so much work right now. We can fire off the Rockside. Rockside is going to be shielded by the opponent. We're going to bank another rock side and then swap out into our Shadow Camera. We're going to shield the first move as they do bait with a Torch Song. However, at this point, it doesn't really matter. We've got the rock side banked. We've now got the energy for a Rock Tomb or an Earth Power. We're actually going to look to overfarm here. It doesn't really make a difference, but either way, Rock Tomb coming through, grabs the final shield. And even if they've got back-to-back charge moves, Gigalith should be winning CMP. Actually, no, wait a second. That does not get the knockout, so we swap out of that matchup. Rockside gets the KO there, and we're able to take that game. Into the next battle, we're going to see Whimsicott into a Galarian Stunfisk. Bit of an awkward matchup for both trainers here, just because fast move damage is going to be resisted. Seed Bomb, not the best move here, so it is not going to two-shot them. It's not even going to come close. So we actually swap out into our Shadow Camera up, and unfortunately, we're met with a Seismitoad, and we're actually going to go for a Rock Tomb bait here. I'm not sure about this, and the opponent is just going to no-shield that, so certainly not ideal. But at this point, I think you just let the camera up go down. Except no, the opponent also baits. Like, we are just addicted to baiting right now on both ends. We go for the Earth Power this time around. It gets the KO. We flip switch advantage. I don't know if that necessarily helps us all that much, but they're now going to come in with a Shadow for Alligator. So we're going to come back in with the Whimsicott. Of course, worst thing they can do is go for a Rock Slide. I mean, I guess technically they could be on Flash Cannon, but that is very unlikely from a Galarian Stunfisk. Either way, we're now going to come in with the Gigalith. The opponent going to full send the Earthquake there. We're now going to bait once again. Rock Slide, by the way, is double resisted, and the opponent calls the bait. That is a huge call on their end. A big waste of our energy, but Superpower gets the knockout. They come back in with the Shadow for Alligator, and we can reach another Superpower. We're already debuffed, however, but Superpower going to grab the shield there, apparently. But either way, we can now fire off a Seed Bomb. Seed Bomb, number 1, grabs the final shield, and we reach another Seed Bomb. That is huge for us. The opponent, well, I think they're committing to a farm down. They're at 1 HP, though, and Shadow Gigalith able to farm them down there before the opponent fires off back-to-back Hydro Cannons, and we're able to take that game. Into the next battle, we're going to see another Galarian Weezing. This time around, we actually swap out into our Shadow Gigalith. And again, we're going to go for a Rock Slide here, not wanting to debuff ourselves with a superpower. However, unfortunately, again, they no shield. So potentially, we should just go straight for the superpower. They're going to go for a Brick Break. We should still be able to outpace them to back-to-back superpowers here. So if the opponent doesn't want to double shield, then we should still flip this matchup, which is quite nice for us. So I guess maybe in the long run, that is beneficial for us as we do grab both shields. And of course, we've just seen Brick Break there. So they're not going to be able to do much damage. They've not boosted up their attack stat or anything. They go for another Brick Break, which is quite surprising. Potentially on Brick Break and Trailblaze, that would be quite interesting to see. Yep, they go for another Brick Break there, so that must surely be the case. Either way, they give us an insane farm down. We can now just fire off the Hurricane, of course. All shields are down on their end. Hurricane does decent damage there. We swap into Camera Up, and we've got the shield advantage. So clearly, we should just be shielding in this matchup. We're going to shield the Mud Bomb. We're now going to go for one extra Incinerate, fire off the Earth Power, which of course, super effective damage. Earth Power takes out the Stunfisk. They come back in with the Galarian Weezing, but I don't really know what they could be running to take out the Camera Up. Maybe Hyper Beam again, I guess. But either way, Earth Power gets the knockout, and we take that game. Into the next battle, and it's made me realize that a lot of Pokemon actually have Hyper Beam for surprise nuke coverage, so maybe we should try run a triple Hyper Beam team on Pokemon where you just would not expect to see it at all. Either way, we're going to see a great lead here as we lead into Morpeko. Again, we've also got Shadow Camerupt in the back, so even if we do go down here with the Whimsicott, it really doesn't matter all that much because we can just come in with the Camerupt and farm them down. But actually, they're going to come in with a Talonflame. I'm quite surprised to not see us swap out into our Camerupt, but yeah, we're going to see a Shadow Swampert, which is definitely not ideal for us, but they throw on really bad timing, so we can just shield here as they go for the Hydro Cannon. We're not messing around here. We're actually going to go straight for the Earth Power. I really do not mind this play because this is going to force them to throw straight away, and they're in range where a superpower will now get the knockout, so we just look to overfarm a little bit. Honestly, we didn't even need to overfarm here. We just need to make sure the opponent doesn't catch the superpower and even debuff. Come on, like Rockslide is double super effective into Talonflame, and this is a Shadow Gigalith we're talking about, so we actually look to overfarm a little bit. I don't think it really matters. Rockslide gets the KO there, and we're able to take that game. So heading into the next battle, another great lead matchup for us as we see a Costume Umbreon, and again, another Say Swap into a Talonflame. That is amazing to see. We can go straight for Rockslide. Rockslide is going to be shielded here. So it'll be interesting to see if we also shield. We can technically tank everything as we resist it. However, we are quite glassy, and you can see these Incinerates are kind of chunking right now. The opponent does have the opportunity to double shield and then swap back into their Umbreon as an example, but still, that's absolutely fine with us. They go for the Flame Charge, and can they swap out in time? Yes, they can. They swap out into a Tinkaton, however, and again, they throw on horrific timing, which means Bulldoze is not going to do too much damage there. We're not going to risk it. We're just going to go straight for the Earth Power. I really don't mind this play at all. Earth Power gets the knockout. And let's see if they come back in with the Umbreon. We can actually now outpace them. We could have gone for Rock Tomb to debuff their attack stat. However, it is quite likely that they'll just swap out anyways and look to clear the debuff. So the opponent is going to fire off a charge move. So of course, Earth Power is going to do more damage than the Rock Tomb. They swap back into Talonflame, but that's fine with us. We've got the Rockslide banked. Rockslide gets the one shot there. They come back in with the Umbreon, but Gigalith is not done just yet, as Superpower is super effective, and it gets the KO. So heading into the next battle, we're going to see Whimsicott into Primeape. So another great lead matchup for the Whimsicott. The opponent is going to stay in initially and then swap out into Licky Licky, where we don't really have the best response. Obviously, Gigalith does have access to Superpower, but it's a bit of an annoying matchup just because we do have to go for the Superpower and debuff ourselves if we want to get the KO. But anyways, we're going to see a Body Slam coming through. They can actually two-shot us with Body Slam, which is quite depressing, but we're going to double shield here, or sorry, single shield, and then they come back in with the Primeape. We're going to go for a Rock Tomb. I mean, Primeape is very glassy, so they like to just shield anything. However, of course, realizing they're quite weak to the Whimsicott, there was a chance that they just no-shield and sacrifice it. But either way, we're going to come back in with the Whimsicott. They've boosted up their attack stat. Is this going to be an Ice Punch here? No, it's just another Rage Fist. So we're now going to go for a Seed Bomb, throwing this before they can go for another Rage Fist here. Seed Bomb, going to be no-shielded. Their final Pokemon is going to be a Corviknight, and this is a little bit awkward just because these sand attacks are going to add up over time. There is the potential that they could be running Ironhead as an example. But I think we just shield the first charge move regardless of what they throw. The opponent is going to full send the payback, and that should now be game over, as we can go for the Rock Slide here. Of course, Rock Slide isn't going to do that much damage, and they might reach a last second move, but no, Gigalith just insanely spammy here. Superpower gets the KO, and we take that game. Now heading into, I believe, the final battle of this video, leading into an Ampharos. So once again, another great lead matchup for the Whimsicott. Is Whimsicott the secret core breaker in the Open Great League? Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell because these battles were done like a month and a half ago. The meta is obviously very different right now, but either way, we're going to see a no shield of the Icy Wind. We're now going to swap out into Gigalith, where even like behind on energy, this is absolutely fine with us because we can go for the Rock Slide. Rock Slide is going to be shielded, and do they go for another Icy Wind here to debuff us? They are going to debuff us, which is a bit frustrating, but they come in with the Ampharos, and the opponent can't really overfarm by much here. We go for the Rock Slide. Rock Slide does decent damage, and unfortunately, they overfarm by the perfect amount, throwing just before we reach a potential superpower. However, we can come in with the Shadow Camerupt. We're actually going to shield one charge move here, and then commit to likely an Incinerate farm down, and we're able to get it with just 2 Incinerates. The opponent's going to come back in with the Dugong, so we can just go straight for a Rock Tomb here. Rock Tomb is going to be super effective. It doesn't get the KO. We swap back into... Excuse me there. We swap back into our Whimsicott, and we're able to reach a last-second Hurricane, which might actually put them into Incinerate farm down range. They should be full sending the Acrobatics. They just settle for an Energy Ball. That is a huge mistake because we get the perfect farm down. We come out with a charge we've loaded. We go for the Earth Power, taking out the Dugong, and we're able to take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.